A crumbling hotel that's been an eyesore for decades is finally in the process of being dismantled. Gary's former Sheraton hotel is being gradually demolished following the lengthy removal of asbestos from the building. This week, the Federal Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Julian Castro, joined Gary Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson at the site to help encourage revitalization of the downtown area. The hotel has been vacant since the 1980s, and multiple mayors have promised to remove the building, which stands beside City Hall. Freeman Wilson told reporters that the building should be completely demolished by October, and the site will become a green space. A U.S. District Court judge has once again ruled Indiana's gay marriage ban unconstitutional. Judge Richard Young ordered the state to recognize the Iowa marriage of same-sex partners Michelle and Shannon Bowling. In addition, Judge Young added Governor Mike Pence's name back into the lawsuit brought by the couple. Pence had argued that he had no authority to enforce Indiana's marriage code, but Judge Young says Pence's actions have contradicted that assertion and are in violation of federal law. This week's order is stayed pending oral arguments next week on Judge Young's June 25th ruling, which found Indiana's same-sex marriage ban in violation of the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause and Equal Protection Clause. A Lake County judge refused to stay a ruling finding Indiana's right-to-work law unconstitutional. Circuit Court Judge George Paris handed down a 4-sentence order which denies Attorney General Greg Zeller's motion for a stay pending appeal. Indiana's right-to-work law requires unions to provide free bargaining and grievance services to non-members. Paris declared in his July 17th decision that Indiana's right-to-work law is null and void in its entirety and ordered the state not to enforce it. Zeller has already filed an appeal with the state's highest court, asking it to overturn the ruling that labeled the law unconstitutional. As the new school year gets underway, changes are in the works at multiple Ivy Tech campuses across the region. Officials from the college were in East Chicago this week to announce plans to expand to a second campus within the city. The building, which housed East Chicago's former Field Elementary, is being studied as a potential expansion site. Meanwhile, state officials approved an agreement between Ivy Tech and Purdue University to lease a portion of the Purdue Academic Learning Center in Crown Point. Ivy Tech hopes to move nursing and health occupation programs from its Gary campus to the new site by January. Following the East Chicago announcement, Ivy Tech Northwest and North Central Region Chancellor Thomas Cooley stopped by the Lakeshore studios to talk with Steve Walsh about the changes. You can see that conversation a little later on in our show. Passenger rail service between Indianapolis and Chicago will continue at least through the end of January. The Indiana Department of Transportation and Communities along the Hoosier State Route agreed to a 4-month contract extension with Corridor Capital LLC. That's the private vendor chosen by INDOT to work on the Hoosier State project. The future of the route remains in question as Indianapolis weighs its long-term financial commitment. Federal support for the Hoosier State line ended last year, leaving operational costs to local communities and the state. One community is celebrating a brand new vehicle, the first of its kind in Northwest Indiana. This week, the city of Hobart introduced the region's first garbage truck powered by compressed natural gas. The truck, which releases fewer emissions and runs more quietly than a traditional diesel-powered truck, was funded in part with grants to the city. Hobart Mayor Brian Snedecor was among the attendees treated to a test drive in the new vehicle.
We want to be the first in many things, and one of the main issues that we want to be first in is environmental issues. We want people to think about Hobart as being a clean city, a city that people want to raise their families, raise their children.
The event also included an announcement from the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. Through the state's DieselWise program, they plan to award up to $2.5 million in grant money for programs aimed at reducing diesel fuel emissions in northern Indiana. Nearly 2 weeks of protesting in Ferguson, Missouri have produced images and media reports that have turned a spotlight on police response to civil unrest. That response has implications for public safety right here in Northwest Indiana. Hillary Powell shows why.
The shooting death of an African-American teenager by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri has spurred more than 10 days of unrest. Media reports show some protesters tear-gassed, sprayed with rubber bullets, and standing among armored vehicles. Some of the tactics appear military-grade, and public safety experts on the national and local levels have broached the question, when is force excessive? See how the militarization of police is being addressed in the region.
They got the tanks out here, y'all.
Large, virtually impenetrable trucks and tanks cruised St. Louis streets this week, a tactic used by the St. Louis Police Department and the Missouri National Guard to stop protests.
What I've seen, they're trying to contain the situation.
Mine-resistant ambush protected vehicles, or MRAPs, are designed for battle, but increasingly appearing on city streets. It's part of a trend since 1991 of local law enforcement acquiring military surplus gear under the 1033 Pentagon program.
When people see images of these MRAP vehicles, it's by nature an intimidating looking vehicle because it looks out of place.
But more commonplace in places like Porter County. Sheriff David Lane says his team has 2 armored vehicles, including one unused military truck called the Peacekeeper, passed down from the armed forces in 1999.
The Sheriff's Department here has actually utilized this unused military equipment for decades. The intent of the armor is defensive.
Officials say it can help protect officers because criminals are using deadlier weapons. The trucks are built to withstand weapons, not to be used as weapons themselves.
There's no weapons that placed on these things. They're for rescue, protection, to stop bullets.
Porter County public safety officials say although these vehicles appear intimidating, they're really just about protection. They say in the 3 to 5 instances annually they're called out and engaged by SWAT team, they're used to protect innocents and serve as a barrier between the public and a potentially active and violent situation.
You're trying to keep people from harm's way.
Andy says allow law enforcement to approach danger with protection.
So even the Peacekeeper, an armored vehicle, we've used it to, there's been times that we've been shot at on call-outs. And we've moved that right in front of the house so that we can protect our officers and still contain the situation so it doesn't go anywhere.
Captain Jeff Biggs says the county's SWAT team has used the Peacekeeper on 40 operations in the last 5 years, including a 2013 standoff in Jackson Township.
A barricaded subject was shooting at us when he saw our officers at the front of the house.
Suspect Eric Martin was charged with attempted murder after firing at police during a 9-hour standoff.
Got a lock room? Yes.
Our detectives went in and you could see where it looked like he was tracking our officers as they were moving in front of the house. If we didn't have that vehicle, then our officers, would have been, further away. If it ever became out of our control, our first thing we would probably do is call surrounding agencies for assistance.
Department of Defense records show Indiana has 8 MRAPs, including one owned by Maryville-based Northwest Regional SWAT Team. The SWAT team purchased the used armored vehicle from the Army for $1. Lane says the vehicles are usually donated to law enforcement agencies and that his office does not use taxpayer money if the trucks are purchased.
Proceeds from drugs or other assets are acquired from people convicted. We acquire either the equipment or the monies associated with that.
But some critics say local police are not military and more oversight needs to accompany the armored gear. Congressional legislation suggested this week from Representative Hank Johnson of Georgia seeks to limit the amount of military equipment that goes to local police. Porter County officials say the use justifies the need.
I'm not apologetic at all that we have this equipment. It's for the public's protection. It's so that we can better serve.
Johnson says he will introduce the bill to help limit local military weapons in September. And another local organization is looking to expand, not limit their impact in the region. Steve Walsh has the latest on Ivy Tech's goals to grow.
Ivy Tech is still adjusting to its expanded role among Indiana's public colleges. There have been cutbacks in recent years, but also some major expansions, including one in East Chicago announced just this week. To talk about it, we have Thomas Conley, who is Chancellor of Ivy Tech's Northwest and North Central regions. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So there's an announcement coming out this week. You're looking at expanding in East Chicago, building maybe a new campus right on the lakefront. Tell me about it.
Well, it's not really building, it's renovating an existing site. We're looking at the types of programs that will be responsive to the heavy industry in the area, ArcelorMittal and BP, for example. We're projecting over 5,000 jobs, and we want to be there to help with the city to have the kind of training that will give the citizens the skill sets that's needed. So we announced a feasibility study process in which we will undertake in the next couple of months, and it'll determine the next steps.
You already have one campus in East Chicago already,
Yes,
though.
right, the De La Garza campus. It's landlocked. We have heavy professional technical programs as well as our transfer programs. This will give us a lot more flexibility to expand the training. We'll also look at expanding things like culinary arts with the casino industry. We'll be a bit more responsive to their needs. I just had a recent visit there, and they really have, over to Ameristar, and they really have an interest there.
We just had Chancellor Lowe on from IUN. You're also expanding at Gary. They're building a new arts building, and they want Ivy Tech to be in that building as well.
It's an arts and sciences building, and we will have a lot of our physical sciences in that building, as well as improving our student services in terms of an express enrollment center, where students can register, get advising, get academic support, get their financial aid in a one-stop area.
So, can you keep expanding this way without having to raise tuition or get some more money from the state?
Well, the building at IUN is a joint project, which is a cost-saving measure statewide. So it really is an expansion upon our ability where we're eligible for a new building. And so this is a way in which we really provide a cost-effective means. It's not tied to tuition. It's tied to improving the services for the enrollment that we serve.
Ivy Tech is also, you're looking at some cost-cutting measures. The reason why you're the Chancellor of Northwest and North Central is because they combine those two positions. Where are you with that? Are you still cutting back?
Well, we've merged administratively the two regions, and we made reduction in staff. That was over $1 million of reduction. So there's cost savings. We've added some positions back strategically. We are looking at different layers of administration. What it creates is really an efficiency of scale where we're able to look across regions. There's 7 campuses now that we can look at how to be most effective and efficient with the resources that we have in the Northwest and North Central regions. That covers 7 campuses.
7 campuses. Can you keep building like this?
Well, we will build and we will renovate. We really go into areas where there's a community demand and interest and support. That's why we're doing a feasibility study in East Chicago, because doing so will reflect that there is a demand for the type of services that Ivy Tech offers.
All right, so I guess that is pretty much where we're going to have to leave it. Chancellor, thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you for having me.
One of the most popular attractions in the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore has remained closed for over a year. Last July, a 6-year-old boy visiting the park was buried under 11 feet of sand for over 3 hours before being pulled from the dune with only minor injuries. Researchers immediately began searching for the cause of the collapsing sand and discovered several smaller holes in the process. Now, over a year later, theories are being explored, but answers are still elusive.
Mount Baldy inside the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore is moving. Changes in wind direction, lake level, and human activity are all contributing to the dune's migration south, away from the shoreline. But last summer, the dune began moving in a way no one had recorded before.
Some sort of hole or cavity that could somehow stay open really was hard for me to wrap my brain around.
Holes, or collapse features, began showing up along an east-west line on the slip face of the dune, the side which faces the lake.
I stepped onto the ground, continued walking, didn't even realize it, and when we came back later on, a hole that was 18 by 22 centimeters had opened up, and we were able to follow that hole down 1.4 meters.
Now, a team of researchers with the Indiana Geological Survey and Indiana University are trying to determine why the holes are appearing. They're using high-tech equipment to gather 2 types of data, The first is a series of images using ground-penetrating radar, which will allow them to internally map the dune.
Every 10 meters, we're taking this ground-penetrating radar. It lets us see what we call the internal structure of the dune, how the sand falls, the bed forms. We can see any buried soils underneath. And by doing so many lines every 10 meters, what we'll do is we'll actually build a three-dimensional model of what the dune looks like.
So this would be somewhat similar to you getting a CAT scan done of your brain.
The second kind of collection involves sampling the dune itself. Long, thin tubes known as geoprobes are pushed into the ground to obtain a cross-section of the sand and soil below.
That cylinder collects sediment in it, and we bring it back up to the surface. We can do what we say ground truth it. We can see what it actually is.
The result so far is a theory which researchers are continuing to investigate. The dune, which migrates several feet per year, has likely moved over top of vegetation and even homes which once stood along the shore.
We can see in the aerial photographs from 1939 that the landscape was largely stabilized, and there was a narrow band, probably about 150, 200 meters of open sand close to the lake. So what's happened over time is that there's been more disturbance. That area of open sand has actually moved farther to the south. So the old stable landscape is now buried underneath anywhere from about 20 to 70 feet of bare open sand.
There were houses in there, there were trails in there, there were little small garages, maybe some barns. You know, we may push a geoprobe down in and come up with some shingles.
You can see the canopy of these trees, and the canopy has it's got leaves on it, of course, but it's also got a whole network of branches. When those branches start to decay, the dune starts to settle. And if conditions are just right, the dune will settle, but maybe leave some void, some opening. So normally this process of decay and settling of the dune occurs in increments. But occasionally, apparently, it also can occur in large-scale catastrophic events, and we think that's what happened.
Researchers currently believe there is a narrow area of Mount Baldy where the depth, ground composition, and other conditions are right to allow the holes to form, and eventually they may stop altogether. Most of the holes are too small to pose a threat to visitors, but park officials remain cautious.
The problem that we have now is there's very little information out there, well, pretty much no information, about holes appearing and staying open in dunes. So we need to understand the process, and that's where the science is going to lead us, and then there can be management decisions based on that.
I really hope that this will give us shed some light onto the past several hundred years of dune activity here and fit into some bigger research projects that we have. Very excited to do this work.
National park officials say safety is their top concern, and the dune will remain closed as long as necessary. However, there are many other features of the national park which remain open, and some have even inspired artistic expression. A nationwide collection of park-themed works is the subject of this week's Eye on the Arts.
Hi, joining me for this edition of Eye on the Arts is Spiro Batistatos, President and CEO of the South Shore Convention and Visitors Authority. I said that correctly, didn't I?
You did very well.
And we're going to talk about something called Art in the Park.
No.
Paint in the Park.
Painting the parks.
Paint
the parks.
Paint the parks.
Paint the parks.
Why do these parks need painting?
You know, a good coat of paint always helps anything look like new.
Especially if it's a dry summer.
Especially.
I have been known to spray paint topiary.
You know what?
But whatever.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Have you fully recovered from your big day?
My birthday,
the big
yes.
6-0?
Yes, I did, thank you. Now I'm just living it. It's one day at a time. But let's talk about Paint
the Parks.
Paint the Parks.
It's an exhibit that's going on right now at the Indiana Welcome Center.
Okay.
This is the second or third year we've had it. Mm-hmm. This exhibit started in 1985 as a way to showcase and have a competition by artists for all the national parks. The winners then get their paintings displayed on a road show the next year. So right now we have the 100 winning paintings from more than 75 different artists on about 100 different parks of the 400 national parks in our country.
That's fantastic.
It's a beautiful exhibit.
So they're painting the parks as a subject as opposed to painting them
Correct.
as...
They don't have whitewash outside and they're working on the dunes, no.
Green spray paint does help a dead shrub, let me tell you.
Well, maybe some black spray paint will help this. I don't know.
So, so they're award-winning artists, and they've painted all of the parks. Now, do you have a partnership with locally with the national parks?
We do, in as much as I'm the chairman of the board of the Dunes National Park Association, and a lot of people don't understand that our national park, the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore, is not able to lobby Congress. It has no money for marketing. It is not allowed to talk to our esteemed Congressman Pete Visclosky about improvements. So they have to have a formal relationship with a 501c3, which is us, and we talk to the government about getting additional resources, about marketing and lobbying and help raising money to create different revenue streams for the park. So we have a great relationship with the national park.
Good. Well, this exhibit sounds really fun. I'm coming to see it.
Well, I hope I'm surprised you haven't been there yet.
I'm lax. What can I say? I'm 60. It takes me longer to get places now. We have to stop this. Thank you for being here, Spiro. And thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Eye on the Arts. Eye on the Arts is made possible in part by South Shore Arts, the Indiana Arts Commission, and the National Endowment for the Arts, a federal agency.
If you'd like to see more on Eye on the Arts or any of our segments tonight, we welcome you to come to our website, lakeshorepublicmedia.org, and you can find out lots more information about our stories there. By the way, we're always looking for story ideas, and we're perfectly happy to answer any questions you might have for us.
Certainly, you can always reach out to us, send your questions, comments, and concerns to tvfeedback@lakeshorepublicmedia.org. You can also reach us on Facebook and on Twitter @Lakeshore Report, and on those social media elements. We always find interesting stories, including recently.
Recently, yes.
Ice Bucket Challenge.
The ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, which is trending all over social media right now. And some friends of ours got together to do this next thing we're about to show you.
All right, my name is Harry Vandeveld, and I am the president of the Fighting 59ers, Andrean High School. We accepted this challenge from the Molshine family, and I challenge the administrative staff at Bishop Noel High School and the entire administrative team of Lakeshore Public Television and Radio.
Ready?
So we've gotten to, we've been challenged.
We have, and want to point out too that this is raising a lot of money for a good cause.
Certainly.
So it's all in good fun, but it is also helping a wonderful cause.
Yeah,
too,
you can accept the challenge or donate or do both, as we would like you to do. So we hope to see you next time on Lakeshore Report. As we leave tonight, we'd like to leave you with our response to that challenge.
Hi, I'm Matt Franklin from Lakeshore Public Television and Radio. We're here to accept the challenge from Harry Vanderbilt and the Andrean High School. So without further ado, 1, 2, 3, jump! Next! Jump!
Oh my gosh!
And next! Go get her! Go ahead!
It's gonna be so cold.
Oh,
I got some of that.
Who's next? Oh, me? Okay, wait. Okay, we want to thank everybody that's participated in the ALS Challenge. It means a lot to me. I actually lost my uncle to this disease not too long ago. So before I get dumped here, we want to extend the challenge to some friends of Lakeshore. 1, Charlie Blum of the Star Plaza Theater. 2, Keith Kirkpatrick of South Shore Leadership Group. And finally, let's see, Anthony Contrucci of Centaur Bank. So, hey, you got 24 hours. Thanks a lot, guys.
You got the better bucket.